Benjamin Netanyahu has mounted his defense, and he says the ICC is anti-Semitic. The anti-Semitic decision of the International Criminal Court is a modern Dreyfus trial and will end the same way. Israel utterly rejects the false and absurd charges of the International Criminal Court, a biased and discriminatory political body. Yep, everything in the world is anti-Semitic. Oh, I stubbed my toe. It's anti-Semitism. Now, in that tweet, Netanyahu referred to the Dreyfus trial. So, if you don't know, what is it? Well, Turn Left contributor Antifa has written a very helpful thread on Blue Sky. To summarise Dreyfus, French captain Alfred Dreyfus was falsely accused of revealing French military secrets to German officials and subsequently court-martialed in December of 1894. The accusations against him were marred in anti-Semitism from open anti-Semites in the press. One of Dreyfus's accusers, and arguably the most aggressive in the press, Edouard Drumont. Drumont held Dreyfus up as an exemplar of betrayal and had founded the Anti-Semitic League of France in 1889. His paper carried the slogan, France for the French. It wasn't until 1899 that Dreyfus was released and cleared of any wrongdoing. Throughout this time, he remained staunchly loyal to France and would go on to fight for France in the First World War. The military, however, wouldn't admit his innocence until 1995. So what can we draw from that thread is that Dreyfus was wrongly accused because he was Jewish, and due to anti-Semitism, there were trumped up charges. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu was trying to fool us, right? He's saying that, well, because he's Jewish and that Israel is the only Jewish state, therefore, this is straight up anti-Semitism. This is dangerous, as he's in effect saying that no Jewish person can ever do wrong. Whilst Dreyfus was on the receiving end of anti-Semitism, Netanyahu was being held to account for simply being a genocidal monster. Kevin, let's bring you in on this. I mean, I would have thought that Netanyahu would have been a little bit more imaginative than to go straight to, oh, the ICC is anti-Semitic. I want to get your response.
I don't credit him with any level of imagination whatsoever. He's just a monster. I posed the question the other day, and I'll repeat it now. Is there any organisation in human history that's done more to undermine the seriousness of the accusation of anti-Semitism than the Israeli government? I can't think of one. It's interesting they bring up Dreyfus as a historical analogy, and a disgrace that they would besmirch the memory of someone who was wrong completely and utterly. And like you say, it wasn't until the mid-1990s, a century later, that they actually finally admitted that he wasn't guilty of this crime, and it was just absolute Jew hatred. That's exactly what was taking place there. And by the way, the Jew hatred that you saw in that instance, and the ones we're seeing in with the rise of the far right in Europe today, should be seen in that historical context of the way in which that fascism metastasized in Europe and became eventually the Nazi empire across all of Europe. Just a horrible historical echo that we could stamp out in its infancy. That's a different matter. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest that this is their go-to response, because they don't actually have a real legal response. They have no legal leg to stand on, and they know that because they know they are committing genocide, and they're happy to commit genocide. They just don't want to be accused of it. So, I mean, you did the joke already, but like literally, if Benjamin Netanyahu stubs his toe or sneezes, it's anti-Semitism, apparently. Anti-Semitic dust getting up his nose that made him sneeze. He's just an absurd creature. Even Zionists accusing other Zionists of being either self-hating or whatever because they're not Zionist enough. It's just ridiculous. I don't even know, purity spiraling or whatever you want to call it. And
derangement.
It is.
I'll go further than that. It's purely derangement.
Yeah. Well, that's where ethno-nationalism leads you. Ultimately, it's a kind of self-cannibalizing force. It doesn't surprise me that you would bring up something like Dreyfus, because, of course, they've done worse than that in bringing up the victims of the Holocaust, the capital H Holocaust, to justify their current ongoing genocide, trying to hide behind the 6 million Jewish people who were murdered by fascism in order to themselves commit fascism against a different ethnic group. It's a despicable betrayal of both the victims of anti-Semitism and Jewish people more widely, because they make Jewish people's lives less safe by doing that.
I mean, I suppose I suppose specifically he chose the Dreyfus trial because this is a legal matter now.
Yeah.
And obviously, if you draw parallels, Dreyfus was targeted because he was Jewish and there were trumped up charges. And that's obviously what he's trying to say.
Oh
The
yeah.
ICC is it's biased, it's corrupt, it's Hamas. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. I'm
But
sure they'll find a network of tunnels underneath the ICC in that paper. I'm sure.
yes.
Um,
I'm sure there's brand new pristine copies of Mein Kampf
in Arabic,
under everyone who
in
works at the
Arabic,
ICC in
yeah,
Arabic.
very, very.
Not a condition of a book that looks like it's been read through and carried for years. A pristine copy, just
Absolutely, no,
placed.
very
You
convincing.
know,
I'm sure. Yeah,
houses blow up, but books stay perfectly
yeah
fine.
that's
Love
how it
that.
works, definitely.
It's how it
Um,
works.
yeah, so
Yeah.
it doesn't surprise me that this is the route they've gone with it because this is the route they were always going to because they don't have it. They just that's the thing to bear in mind. They don't have a defense. But I think we can take not just solace in the fact that, some semblance of the beginnings of justice is happening to bad people, but the way in which I think certain countries especially have responded to this, countries like France, I think, who have been pretty straightforward in saying that if he goes there, he'll be arrested because that's the rule, right? I never thought in a million years I'd ever live to see the ICC do what they're doing, or even indeed see the. I mean, it's a different case because it's not individuals, it's countries. But the ICJ specifically in the South African case against the state of Israel, um, I never thought we'd see the day where the international community we began to see the tide turning slightly. I think this is a genuine moment of potential change. Whether it comes too late to realistically save the possibility of a genuine contiguous Palestinian state or not, I'm not sure. But it's certainly long overdue and something we should definitely be celebrating.
When I heard of the news, I was ecstatic. And I will actually say this. I'm going to make a claim here, right? That Turn Left technically broke the news before the mainstream
Oh,
media.
okay.
That is actually thanks to Lewis White, who's our Turn Left contributor. We've got a group chat going with all our
Mm.
news, and he posted it in there, and we went, "What?" And we instantly we went to the ICC for the actual source, and we shared it, and then mainstream outlets picked it up. Obviously, the fact that we only have like 4,000 followers on Twitter, it got like 10 likes. Obviously, not expecting credit or anything. That would be absurd. But just shows that a bunch of people who care about the issues, who don't get paid for it, can do some good
Well,
work there.
look, I am giving
Um,
you credit, and honestly,
well, I want to take that. Thank you.
considering the good work you do and how shit the British media is, I'll give you all the credit in the world because
Thank you.
even you just sat on here, chatting poop with me is a significantly
Mm,
better contribution to the overall
you're
understanding
correct.
of
Yeah.
the topic than the paid Zionist lies that you'll just see replete throughout the media.
Mm, I agree. I mean, we can have our worst conversation, and it's significantly higher quality than the shit you see on here in the mainstream media. It's why we do what we do. Now Netanyahu isn't the only person saying that this is anti-Semitic. I mean, I've seen a bunch of Zionists online say this is anti-Semitism. I've seen people call Bernie Sanders a self-hating Jew for proposing a bill to stop arms sales to
Yeah,
Israel. Now, Bernie lost family in the
yeah.
Holocaust. Now, anti-Semitism mainly comes from the far right, but I'm sorry, but I think there is rampant anti-Semitism from Zionists. It's
Oh,
a boy who cried wolf.
I mean, that's just
People
another example of the far right. That I don't see them as different
Well,
fundamentally.
you know what? That's a very good point. It is a good point because obviously when you speak to Zionists and you find out their politics, it's not like they're liberal or left wing and then suddenly pro-Israel. So to be fair, it's all one of the same. So you kind of corrected me there, which makes a lot more sense. Now, I was going to say it's a boy who cried wolf though, because unfortunately people aren't buying in
Mm.
it. That really worries me because less and less people are going to take genuine cases of
This is
anti-Semitism
Yeah, this
seriously.
is what I mean when I say that they make the Israeli government make Jewish people's lives more difficult and more dangerous around the world. This is precisely why there is a genuine uptick in anti-Semitic hate crimes and anti-Semitic opinions in various parts of the world. Unfortunately, um, and people won't take that threat as seriously because they will see the obviously spurious bullshit claims of anti-Semitism being made by the Israeli government, and then when they see other accusations of genuine, actual anti-Semitism, they'll just go, "Well, that's just the same as the bullshit Benjamin Netanyahu is saying." So they won't take it seriously, which just gives further cover to the rise of fascist neo-Nazi white extremist groups to do what they're doing. Um, it's just honestly, they are not just themselves bad as like people or whatever, but they specifically the Israeli government is unbelievably bad for Jewish people, and as we've seen, quite anti-Semitic. Whether it's the Hasidic Jewish population of Israel, who have been pretty steadfast in their opposition to the current ongoing genocide and have been beaten repeatedly and arrested and harassed by the Israeli forces, or whether it's Jewish people outside of Israel who dare to speak up in any way, like you say with Bernie Sanders, they get accused of being self-hating Jews, which is an appallingly anti-Semitic thing to say about a person who was a very proud Jewish man who, like you say, had family that were slaughtered in the Holocaust and has been generally actually relatively supportive of Israel over the years, but has obviously seen that this current situation is absolutely untenable and has tried to do even the slightest to just try and stop the slaughter from happening. And he gets anti Semitic abuse from people who will say that anything else against them is itself anti Semitic. It's ridiculous. Every accusation is a confession.
I love that line so much. I've deployed it so many times. I tell you what, the last 2 years, that's like my favorite phrase. Every accusation is a confession. Now you made this point earlier, but I want to bring it up, which is the lack of consistency. So many Western leaders backed the ICC when the ICC issued an arrest warrant to Putin. I mean, Starmer was pretty unequivocal in his statement when it came to him. Now, this is what he said: "I welcome the International Criminal Court's decision to open war crime cases against Vladimir Putin and other senior Russian figures for their barbaric actions in Ukraine. Today's announcement sends an important message. There will be no hiding place for Putin and his cronies, and the world is determined to make them pay for what they have done. I have seen firsthand the destruction and devastation waged on the brave people of Ukraine. These cases are just the tip of the iceberg. One day, Putin will face justice. Until then, the focus of all who believe in Ukraine's liberty and freedom must continue to be on ensuring her victory." Also, can he stop fucking gendering countries? It's so weird.
It is weird.
I wish that was a statement from Keir Starmer about Israel, but it's not. So I want to go back to you on that one. I mean, that was Starmer. Again, many Western leaders echo the same lack of consistency. And look, we know why they are consistent. We know why there is a double standard. The problem is it's only going to intensify the contempt people have for our legal institutions. And I think that is linked to the growing presence of the far right. So, I mean, would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I think there's definitely something to that. As always, the kind of liberal incompetence when it comes to actually applying genuine justice, not just law, or even in this case, and law, will lead inexorably to the far right rising. The undermining of institutions, both on a national and international basis, is a real problem. I mean, we've literally seen even today with Trump having his hush money hearing indefinitely suspended. Basically, if you're rich enough and powerful enough, justice doesn't exist, and you can get away with whatever you like. And Israel, being essentially the foreign arm of the United States in the Middle East, are allowed to essentially get away with whatever they like. We saw, for instance, this week, literally a day before the ICC gave these arrest warrants out, the United States being the only country on the Security Council of the United Nations to veto a resolution calling for a ceasefire. There's no reason for Joe Biden to even be doing this. He's not running for election again. Why the hell does he need to do this? It's because it's like an ideological thing. He is a Zionist, right? That's why they're doing this. And it just makes a mockery of any actual attempt for a diplomatic solution, because they're not interested in a diplomatic solution. They could have had a diplomatic solution a long time ago. The hostages should and could have been released already. But they're not interested in that because it's not about that. It was never about that. As we've seen, they're literally selling land in both Gaza and the West Bank. It's just the colonial endeavor. It's the Zionist colonial endeavor continuing itself. And that's all that's taking place.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.